Let's begin the fourth screencast with habitat. Habitat is the place where an organism lives. Regardless of how good a habitat is, if one essential resource is missing, the organism will not survive or will have to seek that resource somewhere else. Niche involves the role an organism plays in an ecosystem. Niche includes everything an organism requires, everything it influences or is influenced by. No two different organisms can have exactly the same niche, live in exactly the same location for an extended period of time. Eventually, one will outcompete the other one. Symbioses are direct interactions between two organisms. They are interspecific interactions between individuals of different species, but may also be intraspecific interactions among individuals of the same species. There are 5 different commonly recognized types of symbiosis: mutualism, commensalism, predation, parasitism, and competition. Let's look at each of these types of symbioses. Mutualism is an interaction in which both individuals benefit from the interaction. Tick birds eating parasites off of large herbivores, or squirrels eating and bearing acorns, some of which are forgotten and germinate, are examples of mutualism. Bees or other organisms pollinating flowers is another example of mutualism. The pollinator receives nectar, pollen, or other plant products, and the plant is pollinated. Many pollinators actively seek out flowers of the same species, and thus pollination is much more effective than by chance. Is there a downside to mutualism? What happens if a relationship becomes mutually exclusive, with each species depending solely on the other? And then what if one of these species disappears? A second type of symbiosis is commensalism. In commensalism, one organism benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. Cattle egrets and cattle here in North America is an example. The cattle egrets benefit from being around the cattle. As the cattle move around, they scare up small prey animals that the egrets eat. But the egrets don't eat parasites off the cattle. The cattle don't get much from the interaction. Parasitism is another symbiotic relationship. In this case, the parasite benefits by getting a home and resources from the host. The host is harmed by the parasite, but is not usually killed immediately. Usually in host-parasite interactions, the parasite becomes less harmful as both adapt to one another. Obviously, this benefits the host if harm is reduced. How does this also benefit the parasite? Predation is another type of symbiosis, in which one organism benefits and the other is harmed. But unlike parasitism, the prey species is immediately killed. While the interaction is always harmful to the individual prey, if the predator keys in on weaker individuals of a population, the health of the population may improve. Predators may also play an important role in keeping prey populations from becoming larger than the habitat can support. We've seen symbiosis in which both win, mutualism. One benefits, the other isn't affected, commensalism. Predation and parasitism, in which one benefits and the other is harmed. In competition, both individuals are harmed. However, they're not harmed equally. The winner is the one that is harmed the least. Since competition is a lose-lose interaction, organisms avoid competition whenever possible. Communities change over time. One type of change is succession. Succession is a rather predictable change in species composition and community structure, which follows a disturbance and progresses towards a climax community. Species composition and community structure refers to which species are present, what are their relative abundances, and what's the three-dimensional arrangement of the species like. A disturbance is a short duration event that kills or displaces organisms. Fire, flood, tornado, a farmer plowing a field are all examples of disturbances. Climax communities are long-lasting, self-perpetuating communities. If a disturbance does not occur, these communities could potentially last forever. In western Oklahoma, mixed grass prairie is an example of a climax community. In eastern Oklahoma, deciduous forest is a climax community. What climax community is present is determined by a number of different factors. Various aspects of climate, such as precipitation and temperature, are typically very important. Climax communities are typically dominated by K-selected species. Once they arrive, these larger, longer-lived species are good competitors for the resources. Early successional stages are dominated by R-selected species. These R-selected species tend to be smaller, shorter-lived, quicker maturing, and capable of producing lots of offspring quickly. They tend to have adaptations that give them good dispersal mechanisms. They're quick to take advantage of new opportunities created by a disturbance. In the absence of a disturbance, they're gradually replaced by K-selected species. Succession is predictable because we tend to see the same series of changes in species composition. First the pioneering R-selected species, and then those are replaced by the climax-adapted K-selected species. Assuming the overall environment doesn't change, succession tends to lead back to the same climax communities. Long-term changes in weather, changes in the fire regime, introduction of new species, these are things that might lead to different climax communities. This ends the screencast for ecology.